Welcome to the Learning Curve with me, Kenny, the podcast that dives deep into modern L&D strategies and technologies. In this episode, we're zeroing in on a hot topic. How is AI dramatically shifting the balance between custom-built and ready-made content? It's going to be interesting, so hold on. Why does this matter for organizations aiming to personalize experiences at scale? All that we will get into in this episode. But first, let me introduce my guest, and that is Craig Simon, CEO and co-founder of Rockmouth. And there I go with my first error. Rock Mouse, of course. Craig, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kenny. Great to be here.
See, we had just talked about it earlier in the lineup to this that I wouldn't do any hiccups, and I right away started off with a hiccup by quoting your company incorrectly. So
you're just proving that you're a real Kenny and not a robot Kenny. That you're actually not an avatar at all. So well done.
Yes,
that was
correct.
pre-planned, wasn't it?
It was pre-planned. It was pre-planned. Okay, Craig, before we dive into the actual topic, let me ask you, I usually like to ask a little bit different icebreaker question.
Yeah.
So let me start with that. What was one emerging technology or learning trend outside of AI that genuinely excites you right now?
Hey, it's a good question. I had to think hard about this one because there's lots. There's lots in learning. There's lots in technology, and I think for me, the things that are going to change my world and change learning in the future are more around context-aware interfaces. So devices that are part of us and part of our lives. So things with voice interfaces, wearables. Even the Apple Watch when it first came out, I got really excited about it. Not because it's necessarily a good watch. I think they're pretty ugly, but because of the things that it could be doing for us in the future. And I'm a big advocate of technology that allows us to have a better life. So I was away earlier in the year, and this is going to sound a bit strange, but we were climbing up the side of a waterfall, a 200-meter waterfall on these metal rungs, and about halfway up there was about 8 of us, and a couple were there, and the guy said, "Oh, I got some great photos of you when you were going up," and I went, "What? How? Like all our phones are tucked away, and there was no camera, and it's the first time I'd seen them, but they were the Ray-Ban photo glasses." And I just thought, how cool. He just tapped and he was getting these photos. Anyway, he sent them to me later, and I loved it. I just thought that was great. And my mind immediately, I've been an educator my entire life. My mind immediately went to, how could these be applied in a learning space? And in a school, when you're trying to capture students' work, you don't want to be, wandering around with your camera taking lots of photos. But if you had a pair of glasses and you just tapped it and you caught a recording or a photo of something really unique and something that proved learning was going on as a piece of evidence, I just thought, that would be great. And it reminded me of many years ago, glasses that were augmented reality glasses that mechanics could wear. That they'd have them on and they'd look over a motor and it would guide them through taking the fan belt off or moving parts around and doing whatever. And I just thought those sorts of things, those interfaces, the wearables, the spatial computing, those sorts of things I like because I can see they're going to make my life better in the future and lots of others. So I think that's probably those human to technology interfaces that are becoming sort of more powerful.
Okay, I would tend to agree, although sometimes I also have the feeling that it sometimes goes into the direction of being you have to critically still sort through what works for you. And I think that's also going to be a key in our conversation here, is that you always have to critically analyze what tool you're using or technology you're using, and on the flip side, of course, to make it fit to your lifestyle. So there's no one
No.
given way to apply something. Rather, it's how you apply it to your use case.
Absolutely, yeah,
So,
and I think that's what I think I like about the use of technology is that it can fit more use cases than not having the technology. There are more people supported. There are, you know, you're starting to see some really cool things occurring with technology around inclusion and being
mhm,
able to support people to do things. You know, even if you just look at robotics and being able to have people walk or experience the feeling of walking that have never walked before. You know, for me that's exciting and interesting and life changing. Yeah.
that's just when you're talking, you just sound really excited about what the possibilities are and what's to come. But let's now take a look at our discussion point today. And um, my first question would be, why is the tension between custom and ready-made content growing as AI capabilities expand?
Yeah, I actually think there's a real blur, and there will be a blur going forward. I think what AI does specifically around off the shelf and bespoke content is
Hmm.
it sort of it just collapses the old way of doing things. Like it historically, you sort of had two choices: off the shelf, and that gave you fast and inexpensive, or less expensive than custom.
Hmm.
But custom was completely relevant, 100%, meeting the needs of the learner, but expensive and taking a lot of time.
Yep.
And I think AI just blows up all those constraints. You know, that you can generate custom content on the fly. You can do it sometimes quicker than it takes to go and implement a license of off the shelf. And I think that the reasoning between using both of those styles of learning are starting to meld into one. And I think what I think we'll see, and I think hopefully it'll be a sign of maturity with L&D that they'll understand that
Hmm.
it's not going to be one or the other. It's actually going to be a bit of a blend. I think what we're going to see is, I think in the future and not too far away, off the shelf content that can be customized for the context, for the learner, for the time, at the point in time of learning. And so I think we're going to end up with a situation where learners are going to actually be the winners out of all of this, because they're going to have content. Either it's going to be purpose built for them as a bespoke
Hmm.
custom content, or we'll get to a point where off the shelf content will be built that can be modified very quickly for the user right at that point in time. So I actually feel like it's going to benefit everybody, to be honest.
Okay, okay. But so you don't see it as a conflict or tension at all between the two. You see it as a more or less a natural development.
Okay, so there is tension, and I think the tension will be there for quite a while, because lots of people like holding on to the things that are dear to them, and
Hmm.
and I,
Hmm.
I think that there's a bit of an unknown, and I don't mind the unknown. I don't mind
Okay.
not knowing where it's going to go, because I know for the majority of the time the L&D community will make the right decisions, and I think that they
Okay.
will move forward in a way. At the end of the day, L&D want people to learn. They want behavior change. They want
Right.
knowledge shift. They want capability uplift. They don't want
Hmm.
to roll things out that don't work. They don't want to be part of a program that fails dismally in achieving the end goal. Like no one wants to. Um,
No.
so so I think, um, for the benefit of the learner, we'll see a bit of a shift, and I think that's sort of starting to change the definition of what custom content really is. I think, anyway.
Okay. Okay. Well, you opened up a whole. I have. There's a whole bunch of nuances that float in what you just said. Um, Let me just focus on one other point that in this discussion that just came up. Um, do you see L&D as, you said L&D will be the driver in ensuring that they want to see the learners succeed. So is that do you think L&D professionals are capable of that, of being that driver?
I I'm
Tough one.
It is a tough one. I'm always the optimist, and my business partner always calls me on it. But I'm not going to change. I think the answer is yes.
Okay.
Out of the people that I talk to, the people that I engage with, and I'm not saying there's no fear. I'm not saying there are no problems and issues that we're going to have to face. But we did when e-learning started to become a thing, and when e-learning,
Hmm.
threatened facilitator-led content and threatened, classroom-based learning interactions. I think
Okay.
we realized that there was a place for both, and we adapted, and we created a market that allowed, a learner market, and that allowed engaging digital self-paced learning to sit beside classroom-based learning.
Hmm.
Now, we may or may not see the new world of AI-driven learning sitting beside those three, but I'd be surprised if we don't. I can already see now with organisations that we're working with AI role plays and scenarios being embedded in face-to-face in the
Okay.
classroom or in webinars, and things that were tough before, I think, are becoming easier. And so I still feel that yes, the answer is yes. L&D can drive that shift and that change,
Okay.
but it's not going to be easy. A lot of they've got to convince the businesses that this is the best thing for the learner. Businesses are used
Hmm.
to saying, "Give me 20 minutes of e-learning with 3 assessments, and the prereq is this," And
Hmm.
so L&D need to change that mindset of the businesses that are coming to them with the solution. They should coach the businesses to say, "Here's our problem. How do you solve that for me?" Rather than saying, "I want you to build 20 minutes of e-learning because I need you to train this thing, whatever it might be."
Okay. Craig, just 12 minutes into our podcast, and I would have to agree with your partner. You're the visionary and the optimist. So let me just say you've definitely underlined that part. Um, uh, Another critical
Yep.
question, or let's go by. Let's do an example.
Yeah.
So, can you share a tangible example where AI basically tipped the scales toward either tailored or off-the-shelf content?
Yeah. I can. When I saw the question, and it was interesting because the client sort of vacillated from off the shelf to custom to what we still call custom, but is a different sort of world. So the client, here in Australia, there are rules for banking and finance around how their contact centres deal with vulnerable customers, um, people
Hmm.
that might have mental health issues, or First Nations people,
Hmm.
elderly, domestic violence victims, and this
Hmm.
organisation wanted to solve. Well, not wanted. They were told they had to. Our
Hmm.
regulator basically said all contact centres need to train their people on how to deal with vulnerable customers. So this
Okay.
organisation we were talking to, they'd found some off the shelf content. Now it was more around customer empathy, and which was good because it was a bit of a broad net that they were throwing over that issue, which was fine.
Hmm.
But we talked to them about alternatives, and one of the alternatives was bespoke e-learning, custom e-learning.
Hmm.
But we sort of when we responded to their request, we stretched the friendship a little bit about what we called custom. Now, for us,
Hmm.
what we did was we built a role play activity that was, as far as we're concerned, it's custom learning, but it's
Hmm.
very, very custom because every single individual learner gets a unique experience. And so they sit with a voice agent, and they go through a role play that is whatever you want it to be. And in this case, was obviously vulnerable callers who were having difficulties, and it allowed the learner to engage in the way they work, which is via voice, not via text,
Hmm.
and not using a keyboard. And two, it allowed them to actually control a bit of the narrative about their learning. They were able to say, actually, I struggle with people that are elderly. I want to do a role play on someone that's elderly. I'm going to focus on that.
Okay.
And so the learning that came out, the learning intervention that came out of that was, not e-learning. It was definitely self-paced. It was digital.
Hmm.
It was customized, but it was an agent, an AI agent. So we sort of tried to move change that dial a bit, and it was good.
Okay, so you actually were able to apply AI in a method that the customer, in this case, hadn't really thought about, and at the end solution, it seemed like a very good solution then.
Absolutely, absolutely. They're quite happy. Yeah,
Okay.
I think sometimes, Kenny, it's about thinking a bit differently. It's uh, not that I want to steal the old Apple tagline, but I love that tagline. Think different.
Mhm.
I think in this day and age right now, with the shift that's coming at us so quickly and so broadly, we've got to think different. We've got to think
Okay.
about
Okay.
things in another way.
Well, um, let me move to another critical question then. Um, there's always, I mean, with new technologies, there's fears, there's pros and cons, and so forth and so on. So, um, the one question that I would have then is how do you prevent personalization efforts from becoming superficial or automated to the point of losing the human touch?
Yeah, we from day dot have said, just like any type of technology and any type of learning, you there has to be human involvement. There has to be.
Hmm.
Um, the um, in my mind, personalization isn't just choose your own adventure.
Okay.
Personalization is um, driven by connecting with the human.
Okay.
It's about the content and the learner having a connection that is positive.
Hmm.
Negative emotions gets in the way of learners learning all the time. So you want
Hmm.
the learner to feel comfortable, and you can't do that without by technology without connecting and without having that human in the loop the whole time.
Okay.
If you don't have um, that that focus. This isn't
Hmm.
about um, uh, saying, okay, we're going to create an AI learning intervention.
Hmm.
It's because if you do that, you're failing straight away. Just like
Okay.
if you said, I'm going to build an e-learning course to solve that problem, you're failing straight away. Or a
Hmm.
classroom-based course, you're failing straight away. What you got to focus on is what does the learner need? What's the outcome? What's going to be the thing
Okay.
that best helps them to learn whatever it is that they need to learn? And and that might be AI driven activities. It might be
Mhm.
a physical wall that you go and put post-its up on. I think good learning design doesn't change. In fact, it's even more critical because we've got more tools
Mhm.
in our kit bag. And so I think it's understanding what personalization is. I think it's around patterns. It's around predicting, the learner's next step and giving them
Mhm.
having purpose. I think that to me is what personalization is. It's about allowing the learner to learn in the flow of work and take into consideration what they've done before, what challenges they normally encounter, what they might need next, and
Mhm.
having a guess at that. Now, the good thing about AI is it does that really well. It
Mhm.
looks at patterns, it can predict, and it can create the purpose for the learner. And so, but is that the only thing that we should be using? No, just like you know, digital learning, e-learning, micro learning, they're all
Mhm.
great things to have in our kit bag. Now, I don't want to underplay the power of AI because it does actually help all of
No, no.
those things, but at the same
I
time, it shouldn't be the focus.
okay. I think you're touching on a point that I've had several other discussions on AI, the use of AI, and so forth and so on. And a lot of people tend to go in the opinion, those people that are actually optimistic about the use
Yeah,
of AI um, tend to go in the direction that it's just another, we should view it as another tool which will allow us to enhance our overall capabilities.
yeah,
Um, and I think maybe there's still uh, a misconception in, you know, how should I say, not common people, but there's a common misconception that when people hear AI, they feel it's just, press a button and it does everything from A to Z.
Yeah.
And the more I discuss with, experts like yourself, I find that's not the case. It's not I'm just going to press a button and AI will do everything from A to Z, from X to Y, and out comes this person, this super duper training that does everything with zero input from me. That's, I think, sometimes a little bit the misconception.
Yeah, well,
And
Kenny, I actually think we're probably at a stage where you could do that, but
mhm,
I could also get in my car and drive at 200 kilometers an hour. But why would I when it's the wrong thing to do? I
mhm,
think I think you could probably write, and we've tested out whether we could do this. You could probably write an e-learning course from a prompt, and
mhm,
and 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 it would be content. Would it be
mhm,
good content? If there's been no learning designer input in it,
mhm,
then probably not. Is it going to be content that's engaging and that the learner is going to really learn from at the end of the interaction? Probably not.
mhm.
So I think AI personalization doesn't really happen when you just bolt on AI to something. You've got to do it with intent. You've got to think about it. You need to design not just around the AI. In fact, I wouldn't even suggest you design around the AI. I think you design around the person, as any good learning designer does, and then you
Mhm.
work out, can AI enhance that? Can it amplify the learning rather than automating the learning? You don't want to automate some of the stuff. You just want to amplify it. You want to be able to give that person the skill to do more and do better at whatever it is they're trying to learn.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good. Um, okay. That brings us set to the perfect segue to the next section of our discussion, and that's I want to take a look at practical takeaways by role.
Yeah.
So, um, by that, I mean, let's look at first for L&D leaders. What is one actionable step to kickstart AI-driven custom content without overinvesting or risking quality? Ooh,
I think looping back into what I just said, I think not building just for the sake so not building with AI just for the sake of it. I think
okay.
I think they need to think about with intent. It needs to be we're going to we're going to build something and we're going to build it to solve a large problem. And
Okay.
AI just happens to be one of the things that we can solve that problem with. So I think um, just build one thing, build one little agent, one little bot, one little performance support tool that will
Hmm.
change the dial, that will prove that when you use
Okay.
that piece of technology, it will make a difference. I think I hear a lot about, and we were also uh, in that space. And by the way, my partner is also a really good visionary as well, a bit more pessimistic, but he is a good
Well,
visionary.
we won't count that out.
No,
So
no,
we'll include him in the visionary section since he
excellent,
works
thank
for
you.
you, right?
Yeah, but he and I for years have talked about the holy grail being a thing, whatever that thing is that
Mhm.
we have at our fingertips, that watches what we do and learns about our mistakes, and then
Mhm.
helps us learn to correct those mistakes in whatever field,
Okay.
and that's a big lofty goal. And so
That's
we rarely talk about that, Kenny, because that scares the crap out of people. It scares the crap out of us. But I think that's something that is on the horizon. It's a
on the
long,
cusp.
yeah, it's a long horizon away. So what I
Mhm.
always suggest is just look for one little element of that, one little piece that don't overhaul your entire learning system. Don't try and scrap what you've got running right
Mhm.
now, and also don't just bolt a bit of AI onto whatever you've got. That so build something with purpose. Build something that's going to solve a problem. Build something that might be just a small problem right now, but that you can prove that it's achievable and it works.
Okay. Okay. So I think that's a good answer. Although I would say that we still have to do, I think, a lot of education for the L&D departments, because I think there's still a lot of um, Uh, there's still maybe a lack of knowledge on the topics that we're talking about. Hopefully, this will promote this thing that individuals in the learning developed leaders or L&D leaders basically look at this more critically and apply AI more critically when they need to and how they need to for their scenarios. Let's take a look at learners then. So,
Yeah.
what changes should learners expect as AI drives more specialized solutions?
Yeah, I think the learners are the real winners in this space, to be honest, Kenny. I think and they should be. You know, for many
Okay.
years they've put up with a lot of not so great content and not so
Hmm.
great learning solutions, or no learning solution at all. And I think
Hmm.
what we'll see is um, I think we'll see shorter bits of learning that's going to be more specific and more purposeful. I think we're going to see learning in the flow of work. I
Hmm.
think we're going to see performance support tools that will um, take over from the LMS and take over from e-learning or face to face or whatever it might be. I think we'll
Hmm.
see micro nudges and guidance that will pop into your feed, and it might be via your Teams or Slack or messaging or whatever communication tools you've got running on your desktop. I think it will it will it will be learning that you need to get your job done right now,
Okay.
and it won't be learning because the curriculum or the regulatory content is being rolled out again in February of this year. I think
Okay.
it's going to be. I think probably the key word is going to be it's going to be more purposeful in my mind.
Purposeful.
More
Okay.
purposeful. Yeah.
That's a new one. Okay. That's one that I haven't heard anybody mention yet. So I'll
Okay.
go with that. I'll take that. That's very good. More purposeful. I really like that one. That one's
Yeah.
good. Write that one on.
And you know that's what learners want. That's what
Yeah.
organizations want. That's what learning and development teams want. They want content that the learner is going to see the purpose, is going to understand why they're doing it at that point in time.
Okay, so we've talked about the L&D leadership, we've talked about the learners, but now we come to, I think, one of the critical parts that we haven't mentioned actually yet is the content creators. So, how should creators upskill or rethink their process considering these changes? What common pitfalls should they actively guard against?
Yeah. I'm going to start with the pitfall if I can. I think the
Please
biggest
do.
pitfall is thinking that AI is a shortcut. And thinking that AI is going to take your job. I think they're the first two things that I think I'd like to say are pitfalls, because I think if you fall into that trap of saying, it's just a shortcut, and it's going to take my job, then you're missing the point. You're missing the point
Okay.
of the power of AI being able to amplify learning and be able to increase the outcomes of learning and be able to create learning interventions that are purposeful. I think I've said this a number of times to a number of people in lots of webinars and presentations. When you think about what an instructional designer does, or a learning designer, they break down the most difficult things, most complex tasks, and they create instruction to get an outcome.
Hmm.
The term instructional designer, it spells it out for us. They
Yep.
design instruction. Now,
Hmm.
when I started playing around with AI and prompting and things like that, it immediately struck me that the best people to create really clearly defined prompts are instructional designers, because a really good prompt is breaking something down to a small piece to get an outcome, and that
Hmm.
outcome is something that you can test and retest and try again and again. So I actually threw down a challenge at a workshop a couple of weeks back and said, I actually believe that the best people in organizations to write prompts are instructional designers, regardless of the prompt, whether it's for learning or not, because they've learned how to break things down. And a good prompt is exactly that. It's breaking
Okay.
it down so that you get a flow and you ask the right questions and you challenge the questions and you ask it again, and rather than just taking it for granted. So I think focusing on the core skill they've already got, but applying that to writing prompts. I think that's
So
one thing.
what happened? What happened to your question? Did was it then realized? What did it? Was the
So
outcome like you said?
it was in a public workshop, and there were now it was a bit skewed because they were mainly instructional designers, and
Oh,
they all at first didn't think about it because I asked the question, who do you believe in your organization would be the best prompt writers? And I was setting it up because I wanted to say they were, and no one said themselves, not one of them. And
okay.
interestingly enough, they made the same mistake that I think a lot of people do. They looked at it from a technology perspective, and they thought, oh,
Ah,
coders would make the best prompts, and software engineers. Now maybe they can. I'm not sure, but they certainly can't work with a business all the time and get out a specific instruction that is going to drive learning, and that then comes back down to the workflow wrapped around that. Then, and I think creators, learning designers need to really think about what is the workflow that they need to be involved in now. Doesn't
mhm,
mean that they're, and it may mean, sorry, that they don't, they're not creators anymore. They might be the engineers that are orchestrating learning. They may not build it, but they might be working with the organization to help individuals understand how to build better learning using the tools,
okay.
using AI. Because let's face it, business units are going to try and do it anyway, and they're going
Yep.
to do what we're seeing now, and then we're going to get a lot of slop. And so I think having that ability to almost be the editors of the content. I think if we set up those workflows and make sure that the business units who want to build content quickly don't just spit it out,
Okay.
that there's some governance around that. And I think the learning designers, the content creators, are the people that can do that. And I also think they're the people that could actually help clarify whether that learning object is going to meet the outcome. They've got more
Okay.
time now. So I
Most,
think they should be focusing on, well, is the content going to be accurate? Is it going to what is the level of efficacy of the content in meeting the outcomes that the business wanted in the first place?
okay. Having worked in content creation myself for our content department here at IMC, I would have said the same answer. The learning developers, that those are the individuals, or instructional designers are those individuals that can probably do the best prompts, because they've worked on all this stuff, and they
Yeah,
have a that's their purpose, to put
yeah,
everything in a didactical approach. So
totally.
um,
It's interesting. I think there are a number of people. It's a little bit like I was a school teacher for quite a while, and a lot of
mhm,
people feel like, oh, I went to school, so therefore I can tell a teacher how to do their job. It's almost like the business saying, I've done e-learning, I've done some learning, I'm going to tell you learning
mhm,
designers how to do your job. You know,
mhm,
the problem with that is if they haven't designed the content well, and if the design is
mhm.
weak, all you're doing with AI is amplifying that weakness. All you're doing
Okay.
is making that weak content faster, quicker, and bigger, and that's a mistake. And I think so. Learning designers, I think, need to step into that flow and say, okay, let's redesign our workflow of creating learning. Let's accept that there will be businesses that will want to try and do it themselves, or individuals, and let's
Mhm,
put some governance in place. Let's put some rules and regulations about what good looks like. Let's have the learning creators become editors potentially.
mhm.
Rather than authoring the content, they edit the content before it goes out to the masses. Let them be the people that look at the data and look at the efficacy and make sure it's actually ticking the box rather than just hopefully meeting the
So if
goals of
if
the
you want to
organization.
change your skill set, then instructional designer is the way to go, because that's probably going to be, uh, uh, from our discussion, I would say that would be a more and more critical component,
I,
both
I, I think so. Yeah,
for
yeah,
organizations and companies that create content, because they're so to say the the gatekeepers of the outcome, because
yeah,
that's one of the things that I also, in past discussions, that you always have to critical analyze what the output of the
yeah.
AI is.
Absolutely.
So you need somebody that can judge that, and you know that needs to be an expert in
Yeah,
essence. Um, which brings me to another. We've now discussed a lot about how we see AI, how it functions, and the usability. But of course, there's also the flip side. There's challenges, there's ethics, and controversy. So I'd like to dive into that a little bit. So are there controversial aspects about relying on AI for highly customized content? So are there issues around data privacy, biases, or authenticity?
Yeah,
Have you
definitely.
encountered any of those?
Yeah, and I think you've probably already touched on them. I think, yeah, data sensitivity, I think, is a critical one. I think, especially behavioral data, if it can
Hmm.
measure how an individual's behaving. And I have a feeling this could be wrong, and I probably should have checked this before I say it on this. But I think there's a country somewhere in Europe that doesn't allow anyone to measure behavior that's been driven by AI. So sorry, they
Okay.
can't use AI to measure behavior.
Okay.
There's some rules around that, and I'm not sure which country it was. I can't remember exactly, and I could be wrong. But I was told that by a customer who said, "No, we've got an office there, and you can't measure the behavior of the individual to then reflect the personalization of the learning." So I think data sensitivity. I think bias definitely. There's definitely bias in our models. There's going to be bias in all public models because it's fed
Hmm.
by public. I think the only way to get around that is to build your own closed LLM, and even then you've got to be really careful to still not, because some of our
Yeah.
current content is already skewed
Hmm.
to certain directions. So um, I think that bias needs to be kept in check constantly. I think
Hmm.
I, I have a little bit of a fear around over automation, and it's sort of leading to uh, a synthetic humanity, and I I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I just don't know yet. I like
Okay.
I heard a podcast the other day about somebody that was using AI as a bit of a therapist,
Hmm.
and it was a person who was sharing his story, and he said, I couldn't talk to anyone. My partner didn't listen to me. I didn't have any way of just releasing what was in my head,
Hmm.
and he was getting back empathy, and he was getting back conversation. He was getting back information. Now that use case was, I thought, fantastic. He loved it. He said that he would recommend it
Hmm.
every day. But I've also heard the flip side, and so
Hmm.
I don't want to see us get completely synthetic humans
Hmm.
um, talking to us. I want it always to be known that that's never going to be a human, and that's a piece of technology, and it's a bit of code that's sitting there. I think that's the one thing we've got to hold on to. So I think that customized content space could fall into the same trap. I think, I don't think. I think sometimes it shouldn't be. The question isn't about can we personalize. I think that's already that boat's gone. We can
Hmm.
personalize. It's
Yes.
should we personalize and to what level? You know, how far do we go? And very soon we're going to be able to go as far as we like. We'll be able to personalize content down to every minute element of that individual, and I don't know that we should. I think that there's a level there that we should just sort of stay away from. And
Okay. Well, that perfect segue to my next question, because you brought up two things in your explanation of the topic, and that one was the example of having assistance in mental health, um, which I thought was interesting, and I guess the personalization. So the question I have is, do you see ethical trade-offs that L&D teams need to be especially vigilant about? So
yeah, I yes,
because like you said, the mental health topic,
yeah,
you had one example where you basically at the beginning of the podcast you created a tool for making the what was it,
but the vulnerable customers. Yeah, yeah,
vulnerable customers. Completely new term for me, by the way. So I
okay.
definitely learned something today already. That's
I'm glad.
I didn't hear about that yet. I don't think we have that yet in Germany. Maybe we do. It's probably packed under something else, but I thought that was
Yeah.
very interesting. Um, but yeah, so do you see any possibilities or dangers maybe of ethical trade-offs that
Yeah,
need to
I
be
think
made, or that learning and
yeah,
development should be especially vigilant about?
yeah, I think when we're creating learning and development programs, we should treat ethics like safety is treated in aviation. That it's not optional. it's systematic. It has to be part of the way we think. I think we have to look at not over relying on um, on the technology. I don't think we should hand judgment at all to an AI. I think we should manage that judgment. I think learners need to be aware when AI is being used.
Mm-hmm.
The transparency should be completely open. I think people, by their nature, want to do better themselves. I think they want to
Mm-hmm.
improve. The majority of people. So I think it's critical to say we're doing this 100% transparent. This is what's going to happen, and this is the data we're collecting. But this is why. And it may not
Okay.
even be data around a specific individual. It might be a collection of data to say, look, generally as an organization, we're failing in our duties around
Mm-hmm.
caring for each other or
Mm-hmm.
our customers or whatever it might be. So I'm not suggesting that that data has to be collected at that person's level, unless you choose to. I work with a piece of software that I tell it to watch what I do each day, and I tell it to not watch certain things, but I tell it
Mm-hmm.
to watch things that I'm doing and working on. And I say to it each morning, I want you to give me a journal of what I did yesterday, but I also want you to give me 3 key things that I could do to do my job better. And I choose that. I want that because I want to be growing and I want to be developing as a person, and I want to be able to do my job better. And so I choose that. Now, that
Wait, is that so? Let me interrupt. Now you got me. You got me off topic now. But
okay.
is that like an AI driven journal then?
It is. I won't
Only
name the
who's the
brand.
client?
There's probably a ton of them, and I don't want to look like I'm favouring anyone. But on I know
Look,
it is
it's a
only
brand,
available
but
on the
is that
Macintosh.
essentially what it is?
Yeah, exactly. It's an automated journal. It just
Okay.
watches everything I do. It summarizes. It infers. It gives me a to-do list. I can set little agents up to do different things with the data, and I like it. Do I use it every single? Sorry, I run it every single day. But do I
Hmm.
take the input out of that every day? No. Do I look at the 3 things every morning? No. Some days I just go, bugger it, couldn't be bothered. But I wake up and if I've got the time, I'll go, I wonder what the 3 things are it's suggesting I do today. What are and it might be a podcast and it finds relevant information. It finds things. I've said to it to find podcasts, books, journal
Hmm.
articles. I've listed a whole pile of things and it feeds those to me each morning. And
Insane.
I like it,
Insane. Fantastic.
so
Okay, we got off the topic
we did,
though. Sorry.
but Kenny, that it's sort of the same topic. What I was about to say was, a lot of people are worried about Big Brother looking over you, and we were talking about transparency, and
Hmm.
the people I talk to aren't worried about that. They're worried about the data being misused, but they're not worried
Okay.
about the data being collected and used for their gain. Now, we
Okay.
know the world, and we know there are dark creatures that will take that data and use it for nefarious reasons, and that's going
Hmm.
to happen. It's happening now. So you've got
Hmm.
to decide: is the trade-off worrying about your data bigger than it helping you and helping you do what you want to do and achieve what you want to achieve? And for me, at the moment, I'm very cautious about what I do let it watch. If I want to go and do something if I want to do something personal, like book a doctor's appointment or plan a trip, I'll go and use another browser that it's not watching. So it's totally I can segregate it completely. But it does what I need it to do. And I think uh, we sometimes worry about things more than we need to. And
Okay.
now, again,
So
I'm not
worry
trying
about
to
things before they
underplay.
actually happen.
Yeah, I'm not trying to underplay what could go wrong. A lot of stuff could go wrong, but a
Hmm.
lot of stuff has always been potentially going wrong. The the nuclear
Yeah.
codes in the
On the
wrong
flip
hands
side,
could obliterate
in
the world.
essence,
Yeah,
you're at the you're at the vanguard of everything. So I mean, you're at the front. So that that does to a certain degree you have to take different risks or be able to assess. It's a personal risk assessment at that
totally.
point, I
Yeah,
guess.
Yeah. No, you're right.
What are you willing to do? What do you see your benefit as? And are you willing to expose yourself to that
Yeah.
risk, that moment?
Kenny, in 12 months' time, my name might be up on headlines saying my data was stolen and I was cloned and I went and committed some horrible atrocities. And then I'm going to go, oops, that was a
Oops,
mistake.
that was a big mistake. Okay,
Yeah.
then we'll have to do another podcast on the mistake then.
Yeah.
So we're getting close to the end of our podcast here.
Yeah.
So let me do a couple closing thoughts and a couple outlook questions to close out our session here. So classic here coming up. So looking ahead for 3 or 5 years, what bold predictions or big shifts do you see for custom versus ready-made learning content in the AI era?
I, I'm not going to answer that exact question, and I'll tell you why. Because 3 to 5 years is impossible, I think. So I'm just going to say, looking
Okay,
ahead, looking ahead.
okay.
I don't know,
Looking ahead.
and I don't know how far these things will be. And I think, um, I think the majority of actually, I think the majority of all learning will be AI generated first, and human refined, edited second. I think if we do the right thing, we'll let the tool do the grunt work and do the stuff that we can automate, and then we step in and go, right, that's rubbish, that won't hit the goals. But that is under the premise that we feed the AI engines before the content's built, and we
Mhm.
feed it with our knowledge base of our company. We feed it with the knowledge base of our people. What are the roles they're in? So I'm going to suggest, I don't know, I'm going to pluck a number, 80%. 80% of content in the future will be done by AI first, and then humans will refine it. And
Okay. You heard it on this podcast first.
I'll go
Ken
two
said
years.
that
2 years, Penny.
80% will be
Well,
created by AI within the next 2 years, but we
2
won't
years.
hold to that.
No,
So,
no, no, no. And it could be 3 or 5. I don't know. But I feel like there's lots of tasks in creating learning that we don't need to be doing. And those
mhm,
people, if we could reskill them to apply their knowledge in a more valuable way to
mhm,
create greater outcomes, that to me is gold. We've got the
okay,
people there. I think we'll end up seeing, as I said at the beginning, I think we'll start to see a blur of custom and off the shelf. I think we'll see that melding of them to the point where it's potentially half half. That maybe half of the content is modified and customized for the learner. The other half is generic off the shelf that just comes out of a content repository.
okay,
I think, and then flowing into that, we're going to start seeing learning management systems and content management systems, workflow tools, coaching tools that are going to start to become part of the one platform. And I feel like we've got a delineation at the moment. We've sort of got micro learning, and then we've got e-learning, and then we've got face-to-face learning, and we've got video-based learning, and we've got animation, and we've got classroom, and we've got workshops, and we've got webinars, and we've got one-on-ones. I think all of that's going to end up becoming a bit of a meld in a big learning pot, and
so that brings us back to blended learning.
truly blended learning. I was about to, that's exactly what I was going to say. The biggest thing for me is we're going to get real blended learning this time out of AI, rather than someone saying you're going to do this e-learning as a prerequisite. You're going to do a one-day class, then you're going to have a one-on-one coach. I
Okay,
want blended to suit me, not to suit the organization. And I think
okay,
that's where we'll see that change going forward. I think as L&D teams building out content, we'll control the DNA of the content. We'll control the voice, the tone, the information, the templates, the visuals, and then AI will build from that. And that's why I think we need to restructure how we think about what the function of L&D is and what the tools are that we need, and just change our thinking. Think different. I think having that DNA in a thing, whatever that is, this bucket, this database, this well, it is a database. That's when I call it a thing. It is a database, that the AI can tap into, and then the learning designers can say, right, that's 100% off the shelf. Churn it out, send it to that client base, that cohort. This next section, we want 20%, or 20% that needs to be modified because the roles are changing across the organization in their different cohorts. That's going to be 5% change because we actually want it to be age related, based on the
Greg, I see your vision is just blowing my mind. I think it exceeds what we can capture in this podcast.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I think you gave us some really good input on the various topics, some very good outlooks. I also like a lot of the case studies that you had that you directly applied. So for my final question,
yep,
I'm going to take a page out of what you said yourself. Basically, your little journal tool.
Yep.
And you said your journal tool, gives you recommendations, so forth. So here is the final question, and that is, what's one thing every listener should do differently after hearing this episode?
Oh, I mentioned it earlier, and I'm going to come back to it because I think too many people try and bite off something too big. Just pick one workflow moment, one learning thing, one process, and test how AI can enhance that or amplify it.
Okay.
And don't be scared if it can't, because some things it won't. Go and find another one. Find another one. You might fail 15 times in trying to apply AI to one of those little discrete things. But just you don't have to change the entire curriculum of the organization. You don't have to change the entire LMS content building structure. Just pick one moment, and that's where the transformation will start.
Okay, great. I think that pretty much wraps it up very well. So to our listeners out there, if you want to connect to Craig, then just look up Rock Mouse.
You got it right that time.
just to wrap it up, because I messed it up at the beginning.
That's
so
right.
Just look up Rock Mouse and you'll find Craig and his company. And if you just want to get in touch with Craig is super easy to get in touch with. Considering that he's running a company, I'm very happy that you were able to be a guest on this. So just reach out and get in touch with Craig if you have any other questions. And that's it. That brings us to the end of this episode of The Learning Curve with me, Kenny. Craig, again, thank you very much for your expertise, your insight, and your perspectives. To everyone listening, if you find this discussion valuable, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network. Until next time, keep exploring, keep innovating, keep pushing the curve forward.
The Learning Curve with Kenny is presented to you by Share IMC, one of the leading providers of digital learning solutions. Make sure not to miss any of our seasonal content by subscribing in the podcast app of your choice.